Welcome to this session on diatonic harmony and non-diatonic harmony. This is our music theory for guitarists, part 9. Now, in this session, we're going to look at what can Otis Redding and David Gray teach us about harmony. What we're going to do is we're going to look at two songs, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding and Steve Cropper, and Sail Away by David Gray. We're going to break them down a little bit and see what makes them tick. First of all, what do these two songs have in common, and what is their major difference? There's a few things that come to mind for me. One is they're both
done by great artists with very unique voices. And two, they both have a little whistling section in them, which is, a little unusual, I guess. Number 3, they both reference water or boats, either literally or figuratively. And number 4, they both have introspective lyrics where the protagonist is in some kind of crisis or a crossroads.
Now, number 5, they both made the radio charts.
Sail Away in 2001 hit number 11, and in 1968, Dock of the Bay reached number 3.
Tragically, Otis Redding was killed in a plane crash just days after it was recorded, so he never heard the final product. He never heard it released. So now, what is the main difference, other than that one of these artists is still with us and the other isn't? Well, the main difference to me, for our purposes here, is that one uses completely diatonic harmony in its composition, and the other uses some non-diatonic harmony. Now, you'll recall an earlier session we talked about building harmony off of the major scale by stacking thirds mainly off of each successive note of the major scale or the relative minor. You could do it off of any scale, really. What we came up with is a pattern in the major key where you have a 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, 6 minor, 7 diminished, again talking about triads here, and back to the 1. Now the 7 diminished is really, you could think of it more as the 5 chord, which is D7, with a third in the bass. One way to think of that takes the mystery out of it. So that's a little quickie review. Now, typically a song is not going to be written using those chords in order, or all of those chords necessarily. It's a reference for us so that when we're learning a song in a particular key, or you're writing, you can see all of the typical chords that would be available to you that are diatonic to that key. So it's kind of a theoretical exercise. Let's talk about Sitting on the Dock of the Bay here. It uses chords outside of that pattern. It uses a B major chord rather than a B minor. It uses an A major chord rather than an A minor. It uses an E major chord rather than an E minor that would be found in that pattern. So what you get is a slightly surprising effect. And because all the chords are major, it has, to me, it has sort of a bright, more hopeful sound, even though the main character is at his wit's end. David Gray's Sail Away, that's written in the key of E flat major, but it's capoed. So it's capoed at the 1st fret, and I like this G7 capo here. It's a ratcheted kind of a system. You can tighten it as much or as little as you want. It's not loaded with a spring. So David Gray's song actually is in E flat major, starting on the relative minor. He cycles between the minor chords and then he goes to the relative major. So it creates a darker kind of more mysterious feel. He also uses 11 chords, a minor 11 chords rather, by leaving these B and E's open. So the whole mood of that song to me is dark. It's a little darker, and there's some intriguing tensions that he uses here and there. But still, it's all completely diatonic to the key of E flat. Now, to break this down, I'm going to remove the capo, and we're going to look at it in the key of D. His first chord in this song, in the key of D, would be the relative minor chord of D, which is B minor. Okay, and again, with those open B and E, which he makes use of there pretty cleverly, you have a minor 11, and then he jumps down to the F sharp minor 11 here. Back up to that's a 6 minor 11, then down to the 3 minor 11 of this key. Okay, so in the key of D, to review, we would have D would be number 1, E minor would be 2, F sharp minor would be 3, G would be 4, and 5 major, 6 minor, 7 diminished, or the A7 with a third on the bottom, and back up to D. So those are all the chords available diatonic to the key of D major. By adding the minor 11s, it pulls it into a more mysterious, a little darker direction, which is appropriate since this guy, the protagonist in this song, is grasping at straws, trying to figure out what went wrong with a failed relationship. Now, he makes use of open E's and B's quite a bit. There's a D6 chord. Again, that's just a 1 major. He uses the open B in it. Then he goes to the F sharp minor 11 with the open B and E on top. Then there's a G, which is the 4 chord of the key down to the E minor, which is the 2 of the key. And then there's also, he uses an A add 9, again by leaving the B and E open on top. He uses a G6, which you could play like that if you chose to, with the E on top. Makes a G6. He also uses an A7, which is the 5/7 of this key. No chords are used that jump outside the key of D. Let me offer just a simple way of looking at non-diatonic harmony in a way that makes sense to me. We could take the G major scale, I'm calling it second position because our first finger would be at the 2nd fret. Now there's 1 octave. If we continue up the octave, within that pattern is the shape of the G major. Now you've got the root, which is G, the 3rd, which is B, the 5th is D. If you alter the chord tones by half step, sometimes you'll land diatonically and sometimes non-diatonically. Let's take the root, go down a half step. It wants to pull to the root, and you can hear that in the 5 to 1 cadence. Now let's take the fourth note of the scale. C wants to typically resolve to the third in that key. So that would be the 4-to-1 cadence. Okay, the two most common cadences you'll hear in Western music, 5-to-1 and 4-to-1. Now, if you alter those chord tones or the scale tones by a half step in other directions, you'll end up outside the key. You can use those notes to incorporate into a chord tone that would be non-diatonic to that key. That's a lot of gibberish. Let me give you some examples here, just so you can hear it. Let's go one octave of the G, and then we're going to go up the next octave. We're going to add in the notes in between. There's a flat 2, a 2, flat 3, 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7, and back to the root, to the tonic. So each of those outside of the scale notes creates a little bit of tension, and your ear generally wants it to pull one way or another to resolve that. And so that's where you can work in those notes into non-diatonic chords that are going to create further motion outside the key. For example, take Sittin on the Dock of the Bay. Second chord is the B. There's the flat 6. In this case, it wants to go up to there, and then it moves chromatically down to the A. On the way down, there's another non-diatonic note. That's the flatted third to the second. Resolves there, but in the A, you've got this note here, which is the flatted fifth in the key. So, kind of wants to resolve there back to the tonic. Then you have the flat 2 back to the tonic or the 1. You can hear that in the E chord resolving to the G. Now you also have a flatted 7th that's used in the bridge section. It goes to an F, then D, and G. So you have that motion of the flatted 7th climbing back up to the tonic. And in fact, a lot of times you can use that flatted 7th chord, in this case F. You can use that as a substitute for the 5. And in Dock of the Bay, he uses both to resolve. There are literally dozens and dozens of chords that could contain these non-diatonic notes. You'll hear it everywhere. Now, another function of these non-diatonic notes is they pull your ear into a different key center, a tonal center, temporarily. And that's when you get into secondary dominance and so forth. And we'll get into that in an upcoming session on chord analysis. Make sure you check out Dock of the Bay and Sail Away in full, and you'll hear everything we covered. Listen to other music too. You'll be able to tell if it's diatonic or non-diatonic. So enjoy.
Sail away.